Today is Thursday, March 16th, only 3 more sleeps till the LA Marathon, and I'm going to do a pace analysis of last year's LA Marathon race to give some insight on how I ran the course in 2022 and what kind of improvements I can make on race day this Sunday. Last year, my friend John wanted to go under 320. Now, in order to finish 320, we'd have to average 7:38 per mile. Since the goal is to finish under 320, and GPS tracking is not exact, and we don't always run the tangents or the shortest distance on turns or the straightest lines, it's best to aim for 318. And the extra 2 minutes will make up for those inaccuracies. So we set the goal GPS tracked pace at 7:35, and I was also prepared to do a little marathon math at the mile markers if needed. Now, I do have a faster marathon finish time of 3:01:52 from 2020, just before the pandemic. It was a pretty well-paced marathon, and I was able to nicely negative split the race, but I couldn't grab a satellite signal for the first 6.5 miles. And the course has changed since then to finish in Century City instead of Santa Monica, which replaces a 5K straight downhill, which was pretty rad, by the way, with a much less steep down and up, which is pretty much net flat. So even though last year's finish time of 3:19 is not super close to the goal I'm looking for this year, I'm going to use the data for indicators of what I can work on to run a better race this year. At the start, I got to chat with Floris Gearman, who lives in my neighborhood, and I met Mike Ko, or Kofuzi, who was super nice. I could see both me and John in Floris's and Mike's YouTube recap videos, which was fun. So the start was super good and super memorable. John and I went out a little hot, starting the first 5K at an average of 7:32 per mile, which is not a bad thing because the first 3.5 miles begin with a giant downhill. However, I'd say 90% of marathoners go out way too hard, experience an adrenaline dump, and don't realize that they're burning matches until it's too late 10 or 15 miles later. So I was super focused on reining it back and making sure that the first half of the marathon felt easy. I remember John stressing out after the long downhill ended because everyone around us was running away from us, including the 320 pace group, but I kept reminding John and reassuring him that they would all come back to us later. So instead of staying at 7-minute pace, which we could have done when we were feeling so fresh at the beginning of the race, we kept it steady and under control at our goal pace of 7:35 per mile. Then the course went over some short but really steep hills, which slowed us down to an average of 7:37 per mile for the next 10K. From 15K to 35K, we found a small group of about 4 or 5 of us to run with, got in a groove, and brought down our pace to an average 7:34 per mile, which was dead on pace to go under 320, which was John's goal. And like I promised John at the beginning of the race, everyone started coming back to us. Then things took a turn for the worse, and John decided to take a ride on the struggle bus for the last 10K, and we seesawed back and forth between John slowing down and me yelling at him to get his butt to the finish line. In the end, I think we both agree that it is worth it to save in the first half of the race, no matter how slow it feels, and hold on at the end, rather than to bank time in the first half and then pay the price in minutes per 5K in the last hour. Even though John struggled, it only brought down our average to 7:37 per mile, which was good enough for a 3:19:39, along with some vomit and dry heaving along the way. You're welcome, John. Okay, I'm going to use the data from my Coros watch that was transferred over to Strava. I use the wrist heart rate monitor, which is usually all over the place for a lot of people, but I have it pretty dialed in with just the right tension and position on my wrist. We're going to look at pace, which is in light blue, the grade adjusted pace, which is in purple, and the heart rate, which is in red. First, let's take a look at anomalies that were caused by external factors rather than my own personal performance or physical limitations. Okay, we have this pretty big pace spike just before mile 12. At this point, John and I had taken on some other runners, and I was blocking the wind for them. I got water for one of the runners on a wide street so that she could stay on the tangent, so that's why there's a spike in pace there. Then at around mile 21, we see a dip in pace followed by a big spike, and that's me realizing that I was zombie running and I had dropped John. I tried slowing down to reconnect, but realized I had to go back to get him. At mile 23, I had a small dip in heart rate because we were slowing down, followed by a spike. That's me yelling at John to put on his big boy pants and finish the race. I calmed down when he started vomiting, so we slowed a bit there, and I replaced my sense of urgency with compassion, and my heart rate went down again. Okay, so that's it for the crazy external factors. Let's look at some data that shows some bad habits that I can fix to run a better race on Sunday. For example, at mile 15, there is a giant dip in heart rate, although you can see my pace in blue has gone up. There's also a dip in the purple grade adjusted pace. So what does this mean? It means that I need to focus on working a little harder on the downhills, especially the ones that are steeper or longer, in order to improve my finish time. At mile 1.4, we see another dip in heart rate where I'm not working hard enough, but this time on a flat portion that is following a downhill. My grade adjusted pace is also a little low, so I'll have to remember to maintain my momentum coming out of the decline there and not allow my speed to dip too low as I come off that downhill. At mile 2, we can see another dip where I'm not working hard enough, but this time it starts on the decline, and it looks like it's taking me a while to get back up to speed and get my heart rate back up to where it needs to be. At the beginning of the race, my grade adjusted pace is showing that I'm climbing that hill way too slow. Some of that was because of traffic, and some of it was because I didn't want John to overcook from the gun. Either way, I'll have to remember to keep from sprinting from the gun, but maintain a reasonable pace. So I need to remember to keep my effort up and steady at the start, going up the hill, and at miles 1.4, 2, and 15 while coming out of a downhill or while going down a hill. On a positive note, according to the data, I managed the course exceptionally well from mile 9 to 14, and even through the hills from mile 16 to 21. Even though it was also very windy last year, the actual hills didn't feel too difficult or as steep as how it's showing on the elevation profile. I had a train of several runners behind me hiding from the wind, and we were able to use each other to motor through those difficult parts. The downhill from mile 23.5 to mile 25 is almost imperceptible in real life, and the last mile of uphill is also difficult to notice, so I think it's okay to call the last 5K flat and look to drop the hammer and race that hard. And that's it. I'm sorry if I bored you with all the data points. I tried to zoom right through it, but hopefully you gained some insight on how to interpret your own data, as well as insight on what to expect on the course at the LA Marathon. Thanks for watching all the way to the end of this analysis. Leave a comment if you have a question about how to interpret data for your races, or a question about the LA Marathon course itself. Please like this video and subscribe to be notified about more running content like this and have a memorable and meaningful LA Marathon. See you after the race.